And this is a lesson that has still not been learned by most scientists, by rationalists, academics, and materialists, because they're still playing this game of believing that they can ground reality into some sort of formal, logical, symbolic system. This is impossible to do. And if you want more about the problems with that, go watch part 1 of this series, which is the metaphysical implications of Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I won't rehash all that here. But suffice it to say, basically, in a nutshell, what happened was that historically is that 100 years ago, most mathematicians, logicians, and scientists and rationalists believed that they could actually completely ground all of mathematics within something logical like set theory. And then paradoxes were discovered by Bertrand Russell and by Kurt Gödel and by Alfred Tarski and others that proved once and for all that this is a fool's errand that is impossible to achieve. But rather than actually biting that bullet and learning the lesson of like, aha, our whole scheme here of trying to formalize and rationalize reality is impossible and that we've been fools for trying to do so, rather than learning that lesson, instead what most scientists and academics did is they said, well, that just means we have to reconfigure our symbolic systems to outlaw the possibility of paradox. And the way that that was done is by forbidding self-reflection or self-reference. And so the whole thing here, the whole key to all of this hinges upon the idea of self-reference. If a system is capable of and allows for self-reflection or self-reference, which I explained in part 1, go watch that for a deeper understanding of what self-reference means and why it's so important, then that system will always ultimately contradict itself and destroy itself or eat itself alive. And of course, this is completely unacceptable to most scientists and logicians and academics. And so what they do is they pull a sleight of hand, which is what Hofstadter is saying happened here with the once bitten, twice shy mind of Bertrand Russell and Whitehead and others like them, is that what they do is they say, okay, how can we reconfigure our logical schemes to outlaw self-reflection by fiat? And by doing so, we will prevent paradox and self-contradiction. And then it will seem to us as though we have our formal systems and that our formal systems are perfect and complete. But they're not complete. That's what Gödel showed. They're not complete. And they don't capture all of reality. And in fact, they're missing the most important part of reality, which is the capacity for self-reference and self-reflection. In other words, self-awareness or consciousness. That's the most important aspect of reality, is self-reference. And when you cut that out of your symbolic systems, it's like neutering your children. That's what you're doing here. But if you have a bias towards rationality, towards being perfectly logical, if you're stuck in your left brain and you need reality to be logical and to not have any contradictions and no paradoxes, then you have to play now a game of denial, very sophisticated denial, that what you're doing is you're neutering reality. You're dumbing yourself down. You're dumbing yourself down so much that you're becoming willfully ignorant of the self-reflection problems that exist within science, within mathematics, within logic, and so on. And you have to do that in order to keep playing the scientific, logical, mathematical, rationalist game that you want to be playing. But of course, the question is, does that actually reflect the true nature of reality? Or is reality a thing which is inherently self-contradictory because of self-reference? So sure, you could construct a walled garden within your logic or within your university or within your worldview. You could construct a finite walled garden where you outlaw self-reflection and consciousness, and then it will seem to you from within that walled garden, if you always stay within that walled garden, you're very careful guarding those walls, it will always seem to you as though reality is non-contradictory and perfectly logical. But what you're not seeing is that that's just a little walled garden that you've constructed. There's an entire ocean of stuff that's real, that exists beyond your little walled garden, which you've just stuck your head into the sand about, and you're actively in denial about. And so this is the situation that science, mathematics, and logic finds itself in still to this day. The lessons of Russell's paradox and Gödel's incompleteness theorem and Tarski's incompleteness theorem, these lessons have not been learned, even by those people who proclaim themselves to understand Gödel's incompleteness theorems. It's actually shocking to me how many mathematically inclined people will preach to me about how they have delved deep and they have proven and they have done the proofs of actual Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and that they understand the proofs, when in fact they might understand the technical proofs. They might even be able to do a technical proof. It's a very sophisticated proof. They might be able to do it, but they have no understanding of the broader implications this has for their understanding of reality. Because that's not an accident. If they truly did grasp the things that I'm saying here, this would destroy their entire worldview and their entire epistemic attitude and their metaphysics. So you have to understand that there's something very sneaky going on here. Your mind is playing very sneaky games, especially when you're being logical and rational and rigorous. Do not believe your lying mind when your lying mind tells you that, oh, Leo, I'm just being very rigorous. Yeah, you're being very rigorous, and you're using rigor as a weapon against actually grasping the ultimate nature of reality and yourself and consciousness. So watch out. Watch out with the games you play. So a lot of what Western intellectual tradition has done is it has created models, theories, and various kinds of logics which had to be fudged to make reality seem more rational and linear than it actually is. That fudging, that fudge factor, is what Bertrand Russell did in this explanation that Hofstadter gave. You can construct a sort of set theory which is so crippled that it prevents, through fudging, it prevents self-reflection. And if you do construct such a system, then you can start to believe that this system actually is a true reflection of reality. And what I'm saying is that it's not. And see, what's happening here is that the mind, again, see, the mind is more attached to logic or to science or to academic model building than it is to truth. I've talked about this divergence in my episode, my series on deconstructing the myth of science, part 1, 2, 3. I've talked specifically about this divergence between science and truth that can happen. Well, the same kind of divergence can actually happen between truth and logic. And that's exactly what happens in this case with Bertrand Russell and with set theories and so forth. You see, the scientific academic mind is so committed to the academic pursuits that it loses sight of the fact that academia and the way that academics study reality could not be the same thing as the pursuit of truth. And then what's going to happen is that your loyalties will be with academia and with model building rather than with truth. But you will convince yourself that, no, Leo, I'm pursuing the truth by building my models. You will convince yourself of that without realizing that actually building your models, that is a survival activity of your mind, not a genuine pursuit of the truth. And so you see, the human mind is so sneaky that it will even fudge logic and rationality in order to defend its worldview. Because to a rationalist, reality has to be rational.